This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in association with Barclays.
I was quite shocked when I asked for a distribution of where the money had gone in the past to see that 25% of the money had gone to 4% of farms. And I wanted there to be a system that if you're a small farmer, you can make an application and you don't have to have a PhD in applying for things to be able to get it done.
Just what is the government's long-term plan for farm support? With an exclusive interview with Defra Farm Minister Angela Eagle. We get to grips with the latest proposals for the revamped sustainable farming incentive, how your business will be affected. A campaigning farmer hits out over lack of action on fly tipping, and what next for the National Farmers Union following its latest leadership elections. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh. Broom.
A bumper episode for you this week, recorded as live at the NFU's annual conference here at the International Convention Centre in Birmingham. All those stories and more coming up, and lots to analyse and put into context. Hundreds of NFU members here, and we're going to start with the latest details on the soon-to-be relaunched Sustainable Farming Incentive, including changes to payment rates and a ceiling on the amount that farmers can claim. Here's Defra Secretary Emma Reynolds in her keynote speech to NFU conference.
We are making the scheme simpler, and we have streamlined the actions available from 102 to 71. We have weeded out those that were duplicative or weren't delivering enough for food production or the environment. And judging by the low uptake, those which weren't working for you either. We are also making the scheme fairer. Right now, a quarter of the funding is going to just 4% of farms. That is not right. I want more farmers to have the opportunity to benefit from the scheme, and we need to reach our target to double the number of farms delivering for nature. We will introduce an agreement value cap of £100,000 per year so we can fund as many agreements for farmers as possible. And to put that in context, 97% of current agreement holders fall below that cap. We will also remove the SFI management payment for new agreements and rebalance a small number of payment rates. We are increasing rates for some moorland actions in both new and existing agreements to ensure hill farmers are properly compensated. And we are reducing rates for 3 arable actions. But I want to be clear on why we are making this change. I know that there have been reports that we're moving away from income foregone. That is simply wrong. Some rates were set too high, and too much of our most productive land was removed from conventional farming. Payments will still be fair and based on income foregone, but they'll support food production, not undermine it. Full scheme details will be published before the scheme opens, clear budgets will be set for each window, and we will regularly update you on committed spend. There will be no more sudden, unexpected closures.
So Louise, Emma Reynolds there speaking from the podium at NFU conference. Some more news, some more detail on the SFI. Simpler, fairer, easier to apply for, and this £100,000 ceiling, better than we thought it was going to be.
Oh, definitely better than I thought it was going to be, and speaking to people here at the conference, better than most of them thought as well. So has been streamlined, and I think we need to make that point. So we're down to 71 actions from over 100, but 71 is still plenty, I think. As you rightly said, Johann, there's a £100,000 cap on the agreements. A lot of the actions that were 5-year actions have now become 3-year actions, and then we had some changes and tweaks. So the management payment that people are getting has been removed. There are a few actions where the payment rates have been reduced. They're arable actions and not too bad. I mean, they've reduced the payment on herbal lays, on winter bird food and on legume fallow. It's very popular, all 3 of those. The herbal lays payment is the one that's come down the most. It's come down by about £160 a hectare, but there you go. They did also say in their original press release that they would only be allowed to have one SFI agreement. Now, we're not quite sure if that's per farm or per year, but it looks like going forward they will try and simplify it, very understandable, to bring it down so each farm business has one SFI agreement. But that's not in tablets of stone at the moment. We'll wait to get a bit more detail on that.
Hugh, better than expected, credit where it's due, but you grow a lot of wild bird, don't you? That payment's coming down.
I don't grow a lot. You make me sound like some East Anglian wild bird baron that put the whole 20,000 acres down. No, we have 3 or 4 hectares of wild bird. Look, that payment's coming down. It's a good... I like growing it, to be honest, because actually you can really see tangible results. And I really enjoy the fact that we're like Twitch Essential because of our wild bird. It really brings the birds in. I sound like a bit of an ad word. It was so good I borrowed the company. No, it works really well. In all seriousness, though, I think, could it be that there was a doom loop running to manage expectations and we've ended up where we are going, ooh, that wasn't too bad. The 100,000 limit, I think for most people, it will be probably okay. There is clearly going to be the mega schemes, perhaps, where it may not be. But I think there's definitely, it's a better place than we thought it was going to go to. I think the one thing that still sort of is slightly a bit weird is this whole fixation on smaller farms. And we just risk, is it a cunning ploy by Defra just to get through the pre-application, test a bit of new system architecture with a few small farms dribbling in? Because there's not going to be that many under 50 hectare farms, as we've said. The figures, we know their figures on how many farms doing what are slightly flawed, and this is possibly another illustration of that. The key thing now going forward, and to be fair to Emma Reynolds when she was asked about it, is that for the agreements that are going to start to come to an end or are coming to an end this year and into next year and so on, the existing SFI schemes that are on the newish system, that there will be a continuity over, so you can apply to continue for another 3 years before your current scheme ends. That would be great if that can be delivered. And to be fair, she said, I'm talking to our guys about if that's possible operational. I'd like that to happen. Watch this space. So if that comes off, that'll be really good. There is still going to be a lot of nervousness, isn't it, for those people that are coming off the mid-tiers and all the other agreements. There's going to be a lot of nervousness there for them going into that September, not 100% knowing. At least they've got the payment rates down, so they can at least plan that, so that's good. But they're still not completely over the line, and for a lot of farm businesses, particularly on the arable side, isn't it, where it's so critical, their support at the moment, just to keep those businesses barely on life support ticking over. Yeah, it would help if there was more clarity on that succession and how streamlined that process is going to be moving from scheme to scheme.
Louise, continuity is so important. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it is really important, and when you and I spoke to Dame Angela Eagle afterwards, Johann, she did admit to us that they are working on that. She recognises that is an issue, and that is something that they do need to sort out. One of the things I wanted to say as well is that in all this announcement, we were told that the capital grant scheme reopening in July 26. So again, people will be very relieved about that, so they can get on with that funding.
The capital grant scheme, that was just one tranche of money making up this £345 million that was announced today. I'm not saying that all of it was new. We've got to bottom that out a little bit. Governments are fond of making announcements and then waiting a little bit of time and then remaking that same announcement. I'm not sure it's all new money, but there were some other announcements too.
Yeah, so we had this overall figure of 345 million, didn't we? When you break that down, 225 million of that is going into the capital grant scheme, 70 million of that is going into the farming innovation programme, and then there's 50 million for the farming equipment and technology fund. So these are reopening those last, all of those three, reopening new rounds of those, said the total 345 million.
Throwing money around, Hugh, with gay abandon?
The money's always welcome, and actually we know the success of the farming equipment and technology fund grants. They had a good run on the last one in terms of getting the cash out the door, and it's we've always said, haven't we, that those sort of capital grants are getting value for money in the sense that they are investing in those farm businesses that want to progress. And of course, the danger with the old schemes where you had like a flat rate for everybody, it was universal. It's like sort of dole money. It's just drip feed. There's no aspiration. There's no move forward. This is a good thing because it targets those businesses that want to develop, that want to take advantage of it and move forward. It's great that she said it's coming out in March, so at least people can plan. The one big fault with all of these capital grant schemes, isn't it, is their unpredictability. And in a perfect world, you would design a system where you had, say, a March entry window and a September entry window, and people could plan their business development via that. That's probably not going to happen because of how funding sits, but it's welcome money, and I hope people continue to take advantage of it because there's some good things that you could buy there which can, deliver some real difference to many farm businesses.
And actually, cast your mind back to a year ago, Hugh, and we were being told in no uncertain words that the NHS needed all this money,
absolutely.
And that there was a big pull on all government funding and farming wasn't going to see any of that. So that has been a big change for me in the last 12 months.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now a special word with this week's podcast partner, Wayne Astridge from Barclays. Wayne, Barclays has a long history in agriculture. How does that shape your approach today?
We're really proud to have been working with farmers for over 280 years. And that experience tells us that farming is always changing. Our survey found 60% of farmers plan to embrace new farming techniques and technology in the near future. Farm Transition Finance is our way of making flexible finance available to support that journey.
And what does that look like in practice?
We know that every farm has a unique journey towards regenerative and sustainable practices. Farmers may be eligible for Farm Transition Finance if they're already adopting new practices that boost soil health, enhance on-farm biodiversity, improve water efficiency or reduce emissions. Eligible borrowing above £25,000 receives a 0.3% interest rate discount, and you can choose flexible terms with finance from 1 to 25 years, fixed or variable rates, and even take a capital repayment holiday.
And if someone wants to learn more?
Head over to barclays.co.uk/agriculture or contact your local Barclays Agriculture Relationship Manager. We're here to help farmers succeed for generations to come.
Wayne Astridge from Barclays, thank you.
Barclays business loans and mortgages are subject to lending assessment, status and application. Terms, conditions and eligibility criteria apply. Security may be required. For information on how we're working to reduce the emissions we finance, including in high-emitting sectors, visit home.barclays.com/climate change.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Welcome back to the Farmers Weekly podcast, recorded here at the NFU conference in Birmingham. Earlier we heard from Defra Secretary Emma Reynolds as she gave her keynote speech to the conference, and after any Defra Secretary delivers their conference speech, it's customary for them to take questions from the floor. And that's exactly what Emma Reynolds did, and among those who asked a question was Hertfordshire farmer Will Dickinson. Now, eagle-eyed or even eagle-eared listeners to the Farmers Weekly podcast might have seen or heard Will recently in the news and on national television, highlighting the plight of farmers beset by fly tipping, including one of his elderly neighbours who's had a huge amount of waste illegally dumped on his land. This is what Will asked Defra Secretary Emma Reynolds from the conference floor.
How long will it be before the government stops illegal fly tipping by resourcing law and order properly and with appropriate sentencing of guilty parties? The current law enforcing farmers to pay to clean up huge incidents on their land is a travesty of justice that surely must be righted.
Well, thank you for the question. Look, we have seen this becoming a much bigger issue than it was maybe 5-10 years ago. There are significant sites in different parts of the country, and we are working across government and with law enforcement. We have a joint unit on this. The Prime Minister is also seized of this issue. So we are really putting more resource into the Environment Agency. We have doubled their budget with regard to the enforcement of this. The idea, obviously, is that the polluter pays. We are making some progress on that. We've made, I didn't myself, I'm not part of the police, but there were some significant arrests last week. And we do believe that some of the perpetrators of this criminal activity, organised crime, and they're venturing into illegal waste. So we have got a cross-government effort looking at, how we strengthen our tools to crack down on this, but I recognise that it's a really big problem. In fact, I have a farmer in my own constituency who's had significant fly tipping as well. So I hear you, we are working on it. It's not an easy thing to deal with because of the way the perpetrators use other people's land, and sometimes their own land, by the way, to dump this illegal waste onto. And we're looking at also what are the levers and the pull factors, and we're also looking at what we can do to boost the technology that the Environment Agency uses so that they can see what's going on and anticipate some of the problems. So we're looking at what we can do to help clear sites in the extreme circumstances like we were doing in Kidlington, and we're looking at how we can prevent this in the first place. But it's not an easy challenge, and thank you for the question. It's a really, really big issue for the government.
That's Defra Secretary Emma Reynolds responding to a fly tipping question from Hertfordshire farmer Will Dickinson. And after that Q&A session, I caught up with Will and I asked him whether he was happy with the answer Emma Reynolds gave.
I think I remain disappointed that the fundamental problem with the fly tipping question is the fact that actually the criminals get away with it by and large. And so there's little to discourage them from doing it. Even if they get caught, the chances of them getting caught are 1 in 20. The chances of them getting a fine more than £1,000 are less than 5%. It's just distressing that nobody seems to want to take the crime seriously. Of course, the ultimate injustice in the whole thing is the fact that as a victim of crime, you then become the criminal, in that the local council have a duty to prosecute you for receiving uncontrolled waste, and you are legally obliged to pay to have the mess cleared up.
We know in the countryside that this is a problem that has been going on for years and years and years. Finally, the mainstream media seem to be really picking up on it. Does that increase the amount of hope that you have that something might be done?
I'm always hopeful, Johann, always hopeful. I think that we need to get into the justice system. The Sentencing Guidelines Council notes are hopelessly inadequate or out of date. And criminals, just yesterday, there was a case appointed where a chap tipped a whole skipload of rubbish on the lane outside my next-door neighbour's farm. He was fined £192, which is approximately half the cost of the skip, let alone the effort to put rubbish in the skip. So it's a nonsense that justice can't seem to cope with this sort of crime. The other thing that I think, I'm encouraged by the fact that the Secretary of State is looking to increase surveillance. She's increased the resources for the Environment Agency. I'm disappointed that she didn't say that at the moment local district councils are obliged to prosecute and not the police. Local district councils are hideously under-resourced. In our own district, we have one person, and he has to deal with all the public cases of fly tipping and regardless of the fly tipping incident on private land. He simply cannot cope with that sort of workload.
There's a climate of fear, as it were, out there that people are scared to speak out, that for fear that they might be targeted. You have spoken out. You've also in close contact with somebody who's a major victim of fly tipping. How are they doing?
When I spoke to my neighbour phoned me last summer to tell me what had happened, and he was distraught. He was completely destroyed. It's an elderly gentleman. He had just lost his wife, and it really was quite a shattering moment for him. As a result of the publicity from that case, a wonderful gentleman started a crowdfunding, and now we're in a situation where the fund has exceeded the cost of the clear-up, which has transformed my neighbour. It's absolutely, it's removed that weight. What was last year a pretty dreadful year for him has now given him one of hope in the goodness of humankind. So it has transformed him. But I think it's sad that the system relies on the goodwill of the general public to try and sort out the injustice, when it's plain in law that the law is wrong. The law is unjust.
So Hugh, we know what a scourge fly tipping is in the countryside. Hertfordshire farmer Will Dickinson there taking Defra Secretary Emma Reynolds to task on the issue, and then telling us afterwards about this heartfelt situation with one of his neighbours, an elderly farmer facing a clean-up bill that's going to stretch into the tens of thousands of pounds and having to rely on a crowdfunding campaign to clear up the mess.
Yeah, look, the whole thing is wrong. We know fly tipping. Anyone that's been a victim of fly tipping knows that unless if the tip is on a public highway, so that could be a road or it could be a footpath, then the local highways authority or the local district council usually are beholden to come and clean it up. But if it's on private land, there's no help at all. It comes back to this whole, you'd like to think we've been on and up and down. The previous government was up and down this street. The big change on fly tipping for me came way back, nearly 20 years ago, when all of the responsibility for that waste control was put onto waste enforcement officers in local district councils. Most of those local district councils at the time, my one where I live in Surrey, didn't have a Scooby. They didn't have one for 9 months, nearly a year. They finally employed one, and then most of the time they then spent managing the bin contracts because they didn't have the resource to do that. So the whole resourcing of this is no longer directly a police issue. The police are not the ones prosecuting. It's the Waste Enforcement Authority, as in the local district council or the EA in the big areas. But you talk to the EA guys, they're under-resourced, trying to get stuff to court. So they're only really targeting these massive tips. They're bad, but equally, there are plenty of people listening to this who've been affected by individual little tips here and there. They're not professional criminals, they're just lazy people that just tip stuff here, there or other, or the tip closes early so they go down the lane and chuck a bed over a hedge, or they've been doing a building job and they drive over the hill back through the rural area and tip all the rubble out in the hedge, and it's targeting those. There needs to be a fully joined up approach to this from police, local authority, waste enforcement and environment agency, and at the moment it's not happening.
And Louise, the penalties need to be higher.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's another side of the problem, isn't it? I mean, around us, we have had a couple of prosecutions when we've been able to work out who it is who's been tipping this stuff, but they get some little fine. It's really not enough to stop them carrying on with these activities because they're quite lucrative to them. They arrange to take people's waste away and they leave it in the lane. So, yeah, we need some proper penalties as well as the joined-up approach that Hugh's just been talking about.
But the other thing is actually empowering the police to tackle this, because at the moment, unfortunately, the police turn up. If you caught someone red-handed fly tipping, the police would turn up. They would take their details, but there's nothing they can do in terms of enforcement because all of that enforcement is done by the local authority. Now, interestingly, if, say, for example, the police turn up to tackle someone that's been poaching, and you've got hook, line and sinker in terms of evidence in the car, there's dead pheasants, there's catapults, people have witnessed them, they're happy that it's a fair cop. Now, the Poaching Act from 1823, as 50 quid fine and a slap on the wrist by the magistrates. But if you apply the proceeds of crime legislation, I think it is, the police officers, if they're switched on, they can take that vehicle and seize it, and that person never gets it back. That is a bigger deterrent than 50 quid down the magistrate's court, and that should exactly be what's happening with these fly tippers. And we need far more robust security around our farms, around our countryside, and we need these agencies to be on it and really, because it's costing farmers, landowners and local authorities millions and millions in cleaning up every year.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And as we say every week, if you're in the UK itself, you can also message us by texting the word farm followed by a message to 88440. This week, though, people have been giving us their messages in person. We're recording this as live from the NFU annual conference here at the International Convention Centre in Birmingham. And it's great to see so many farmers here. And thank you to everyone who's come up and said hello to us while we've been here. Great to see you, have a chat and put the world of farming to rights. Hugh, Louise, very much a positive atmosphere here despite all the trials and tribulations farming faces, and I don't know whether that is because everyone here is determined to have a good time and is in a positive frame of mind, or whether it's because we've all left our troubles back on the farm or indeed at home. Whatever the reason, an upbeat atmosphere, dare I say, including for farm leader Tom Bradshaw, who's got a smile on his face after being re-elected for a second term as NFU president, Hugh.
Yeah, it's more than 90% of the vote re-elected, so yeah, pretty resounding victory for Tom. And I think overall Tom had he's had a tough year or 2 years, hasn't he, in terms of what he's had to go through, in terms of the challenges, juggling balls, spinning plates, call it what you will. None of that's been easy, particularly with the whole thing dominated by IHT. Not long after he got elected, got his feet under the table, thought he'd get stuck into the farmy stuff, and then boom, the budget happens at the end of 24, and 14 months of your life is effectively focused on just that, along with trying to do all the rest of the day job stuff as well that's within that role. But yeah, look, I think that's a pretty resounding victory for him in terms of, the vote. And I think he had a good conference overall. He was really banging the drum around food security. Resilience was the theme of the conference. And I think that came through loud and clear, whether it was to the ministerial audience in the hall in the afternoon on the first day, or indeed the wider delegates earlier on that day. So, yeah, he's done well.
Louise, the NFU is a broad church, much like Farmers Weekly, really. We have sort of readers right across the farming spectrum. So does the NFU. I don't think any president is universally liked by everyone. It's just the nature of the job. But Tom, he really does seem to have grown into the role, and I thought he came across as being really presidential, I guess, during this conference.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you, Johann. I mean, nobody can accuse Tom of not putting the hours in, can they? He has worked really hard since he became president first time round and really done the hard yards. So I think it's fantastic. I think it's right that he gets a second term. I mean, one of the things that was very clear to all of us this week was how he has managed to turn around the relationship with Defra. So I thought that he and Emma Reynolds were working well together. They seem to be in agreement. They've obviously got a working relationship which can make things happen, and that's really good news, and that's good for NFU members too.
Partnership working, Hugh, just briefly, I mean, you see that as well from the conference floor?
Yeah, I think it was, we saw the ministers, she's only been in post for 6 months. And obviously the IHT debate has been a real huge distraction on every other bit of policy work that goes on. But I think the reality is, there is so much other stuff to sort out as well, whether it's SFI, whether it's farming rules for water, whether it's TB, whether it's ID on cows, SPS. I mean, the list goes on. It is not a small shopping list, and it is not a simple shopping list, all right, or to-do list. So I think you need to have a constructive working relationship, regardless who the government is, what they are. And I think that is really important, and I think that was very much on display at the conference. And I hope it's a reset for that relationship. There are 2 ministers in position now who seem to want to get on and nail it and get it sorted. And let's hope, as an industry, we can help them to do it as effectively and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, two ministers already heard from Defra Secretary Emma Reynolds, and later on in this podcast we will be hearing from Farming Minister Angela Eagle. Tom Bradshaw saying very much that for as long as he's NFU president, he will be round the table with government, wanting to work with government to get things done rather than at loggerheads with them. So Tom re-elected 90% or so of the vote, not re-elected. Deputy President David Exwood and Vice President Rachel Hallos both losing out to challengers. Louise, Yorkshire farmer Paul Tompkins elected as deputy, and Vice President Robin Munt from the Isle of Wight. Louise, I understand one council delegate described the election process to you as a little bit like something out of The Traitors.
Yeah, it was described to me like that. Unfortunately, I've never watched The Traitors, so I just had to sort of understand what I could from that. But I mean, it seems pretty brutal to me, really, that, these are people who have worked very hard on behalf of members. But anyway, it's change. I don't know how common it is that two office holders fall by the wayside in elections, but there you go.
Both Paul and Robin, Hugh, Paul from a commodity board background and Robin from a regional chair background, they really are at the coalface, I guess, when it comes to policy making and working with government already. So that is a good thing.
Yeah, I think, the previous two incumbents, and it's worth paying tribute to the hard work that's been done by both David Exwood and Rachel Hallos in the time that they've been in office. They both came from the regional board chair route. Robin was South Regional Board, and then Paul's been, as many people know, has been the Dairy Chair. We've had him on the podcast in his role as Dairy Commodity Board Chair for the last 2 years. Prior to that, he was on that board for a long time. He was the Vice Chair. There are two very different sides to the union there, because if you're coming through, I get involved. I'm a regional, I may not be. I could get traited in a couple of weeks' time at our next regional livestock board. Get your votes in. I'm the East Livestock Chair for the Eastern region, looking after the red meat stuff. And then I go into the national board, and then that feeds up to the FEP board at the top, which is all the commodity board chairs and the senior office holders. So that's a very different route to the county chairs and the council reps who sit on council. They're dealing with the sort of day-to-day. They're dealing with all that policy stuff as well, but they see two very different sides, I think, as to what actually goes on. There's not many that are county chairs and go to council and also sit on one of the national commodity boards. So it is two very different sides. But look, in Paul and in Robin, you've got two very capable people. It is hard work, and you've got to respect, for the people that got deselected to the ones that got selected, huge respect for all of them for putting your head above the parapet. But equally, if you're prepared to put your head above the parapet, you've also got to be prepared to have it knocked off, I suppose. So that's sort of the pros and cons of the democratic electoral system, be it like traitors or not. That is a fact of life. That is what happens. And ultimately, the successful ones are the ones that make it work for as many people and get as many people to vote for them and support them in going forward and doing what they do.
Yeah, one day you're Deputy President or Vice President of the National Farmers Union, chairing a session on the stage there at National Conference, and the next day, if you're not re-elected, you're back on the farm shoveling stuff uphill. In a different way, I guess. Louise, more broadly though, a good conference, do you think?
I think it was a very good conference, and I think you only have to cast your mind back 12 months to recognise how the tone has changed, if you like. So, we were still reeling, I guess, weren't we, 12 months ago with some of the decisions that the government had made. And, it was a bit more like a standoff, wasn't it, last year? Whereas this year, as we've already mentioned and discussed slightly, there is much more of a partnership approach now. And you could really sense that and feel that. It came across in many of the presentations. The whole, as I said, the tone has changed, the mood has changed. And dare I say it, much more optimism coming in now that these issues are being addressed, they're being sorted out. So, I think it was a really good conference, and as I said at the beginning of this, markedly different to the last one.
And you, Hugh?
Yeah, it's been a good conference. I think it's worth just paying a very quick tribute to Terry Jones. Tributes were paid to him by the minister, actually, on the stage during the political session and at the dinner on the Tuesday night. Terry's been Director General of the NFU for the past 10 years. Prior to that, he's worked for the union, and he worked away from the union for a time, and he worked for the union when he first, I suppose, started working. So he's done a lot of years for the NFU. So tributes paid to Terry for all his work over the years. And I think going forward now, the new Director General, I think, starts in May. Sophie Throop, who's obviously come over from, she's been working at Morrison's running their agricultural portfolio stuff. There's lots of change, and I think there needs to be lots of change going forward. So I think it was a positive conference in the sense that this whole partnership theme and the resilience theme highlights, it has to highlight the importance of food production because all the people there are involved in food production. So that's a no-brainer. But I think in terms of highlighting the resilience thing, the food security thing, given all that's going on around the world and everything that's happening, the security situation, it has to be utterly emphasised and reiterated. And that was done well. But I think the partnership thing is good. And I think optimistically going forward, there will need to be change. There will not be the same number of NFU members now than there will be in 5 years' time. Look, it'd be great if it went up. I suspect it'll go the other way because consolidation will continue. That is not going to change despite having, small farm entry windows for support schemes. But that change is really important because the union and the organisation has to evolve going forward. It has to continue to be a phenomenal lobbying organisation, which it has been for over 100 years, representing all of its members across a very broad church, but it has to do it in the world that it finds itself in, both politically and also financially, in terms of the numbers of members it has and the numbers of people that it are representing. And it evolves and it does it successfully. So it's moving forward now on to the next phase.
Well, that's the lowdown when it comes to NFU conference, Hugh. What's the lowdown when it comes to this week's markets?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished the deadweight this week. It edges ever so slightly, 0.5 of a penny, half a p up, 636.9, up from 636.4 last week. Oh my word, look, what a fluke. It is exactly the same number this week as it was a year ago, 636.9. So certainly some tightness there in the cattle market, just starting to creep back in. And any of you that watch the store markets at the moment will see that absolutely evident in terms of numbers on the ground coming forward and the prices that the fewer cattle coming forward are making. There is certainly some strength in that market. Finished steer live weight 366.7. That goes up around about 2p on the week. To the sheep ring 723.8. That's this week's SQQ. On the dead weight up pretty much 10p, almost 11p, 10.8p up on the week before. So some demand coming through there. On the live rings 369.5. That's up nearly 20p on the week. So plenty of demand for sheep as well. And by no accounts, when you speak to people, there seems to be no concerns over supply of lambs, hoggets coming forward. If anything, some of them regrouping, bit of finer weather, finally starting to get some finish on their backs. For the pigs, 186.5, not good news. Back another 1.5p on the week. This time a year ago, the pig price was 203.9. Arable markets, I'm afraid, equally is, well, they're slightly up, a bit of a tickle. I think there was a bit of a tickle in the markets, wasn't there? If you read some of the commentary around the Trump tariff shenanigans of a few days ago, it went up, then it went down, it blipped around, a little bit of a spike went through the market. It's added a few pence and a few pounds here and there. Feed wheat up 162.9, so up just over 150 on the week. Milling wheat 172 dead, that's gone up 50p on the week. Feed barley 152.4, that's actually risen about £4 on the week. Oilseed rapes at 430.60, that's gone up nearly £2 on the week. Feed peas 205.8, that's gone up 30p on the week. Feed beans 206.2, that's actually gone back 40p on the week. The diesel price, I'm afraid, though, has kicked on with all that liveliness in the market. You've added 3 pence, a litre of red diesel this week 69.04, up from 66.11 last week.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, Emma Reynolds wasn't the only Defra minister at NFU conference this year. Farm Minister Angela Eagle, Dame Angela Eagle, was also in attendance. And not having had her on the podcast before, we thought it would be a good idea to interview her and pick her brains. So we found a quiet spot in the depths of the conference centre, clipped a microphone onto her lapel and fired her a few questions. We covered a range of topics, including farm support, environmental permitting for beef and sheep farmers, and the future for UK agriculture. Dame Angela has been an MP since 1992, representing the Merseyside constituency of Wallasey on the Wirral Peninsula. Not exactly a place known for its farming credentials, and I wanted to know whether that mattered for her job at Defra.
So Dame Angela, not from a farming background and
No.
outsider to the industry, what was it like when you first walked in that door at Defra? Was there anything that took you by surprise?
Oh, well, I don't think you have to be from a farming background to do this job. We all eat food. We all rely on the work that farmers do up and down the country to make sure that we have our food supplies, and it's a necessity. So I think we've all got a stake in it. I think that when I came into the department, obviously we were in the middle of an issue about inheritance tax that I'm glad we've been able to do something about. And I think that I was struck as well by the fact that we were kind of in between the old systems, which the farming support systems, and an annual kind of budget, just trying to do a comprehensive spending review, which would give us an envelope of funding that we could work more strategically with. And I think that the changes to SFI go into that to try and simplify it and then settle it down so it's more predictable. We're going to have the farming roadmap. We've had the Batters review, and I think that gives us a much more coherent, strategic approach that I hope farmers all sort of appreciate and begin to see the direction that working in partnership with them we want to take farming.
And where are you on farm support? Do you see it as something generally as being something that is essential for agriculture, or do you see it as something that farmers really need to be weaned off? We know that it's changing, but how do you see it?
It is changing. I mean, there is a transition in farming which is quite important to achieve appropriately, and that is we need to farm in a much more environmentally sustainable way, which will mean that we can actually paradoxically guarantee our food supplies more if we look after the environment more than we have done in the past. I think that transition from basic payment schemes, which didn't really achieve anything, to something that's much more environmentally sustainable is an important one. But I think there are other transitions going on as well. The agri-tech revolution is lurking, and something that we are trying to ensure we can achieve and be at the forefront of in the country. Very new, different ways of doing things that are quite exciting. It's actually struck me since I got this job that we've got a new agricultural revolution going on, which might be as important as the one we've all read about in history books.
And in terms of farmers having to do more and that agricultural revolution, what are you trying to achieve with the SFI? We've seen the £100,000 cap announced today, which, to be honest, is better than a lot of people thought. We've seen some adjustments to payment rates in both directions. We've seen a simplifying of the number of options down to 70 from 100. That you are tweaking it as you're going along. What's the overall goal from this revamped SFI, apart from making it simpler and fairer? Where is it going?
Well, I do think it's important that we try to make it easier for smaller farmers to engage with. I was quite shocked when I asked for a distribution of where the money had gone in the past iterations of SFI to see that 25% of the money had gone to 4% of farms. And I wanted there to be a system that if you're a small farmer on quite small land, you can come back after a hard day and actually make an application, and you don't have to have a PhD in applying for things to be able to get it done. I think it's important that we try to have environmental schemes covering smaller farms, which is why we've opened a window for small farms and those without an agreement first. And we have the cap because we don't want that kind of distribution to occur in quite that way again. We want the money to go to every part of the farming system rather than just the people that have got big enough guns and advisors and agents to be able to handle what is a scheme that's become far too complex.
You do seem to be recognising the importance of food production in this. You're not you're restricting further the overwintered stubbles, restricting how much people can put into overwintered stubbles. The payment rates that for things like herbal lays have been eased back because I guess your view is that farmers can actually make money from herbal lays. So you don't need,
we don't want. The paradox is that if you make money from herbal lays, and you've designed a scheme that means people can stop producing food at all and just have herbal lays, that seems to be an unintended consequence. So I think that when you see how people have engaged with a previous scheme, you realise that maybe there's been an unintended consequence there, that we bought too many herbal lays and people have stopped producing things that they would normally produce. And so you change the system so that can't happen in the future.
If we move it on a little bit, trade equivalence, one gripe that does stand up to our argument among farmers, they see that they have to abide by all these additional rules, animal welfare, etc. Food coming into the country that doesn't meet those standards. There was a speaker on the stage today saying that trade agreements, they always end up in an argument between the trade minister and the agriculture minister, and the trade minister usually wins.
I get on with the trade minister very well because we're old friends, and so he doesn't get all of his own way when it comes to that. But I'd like to say a couple of things. Firstly, I think that the trade agreements we make actually give us opportunities to export as well as being worried about imports. And I think we haven't thought enough in the recent past about how we might do that. We've heard from the NFU conference that trade with our nearest partners in the EU fell, they say, by close to 30%. I think our figures are 20 in the last 6 years. We want to restore that with the SPS agreement that we're making. And so I want people to see trade as an opportunity. I think British food and the way that we produce it to very high standards, particularly our livestock and meat, it's something that we ought to be able to sell to the rest of the world. We've got the first consignment of beef arriving in the US. I think the Secretary of State mentioned that as a result of the trade deal there. So we should be more optimistic about what we can sell.
We are covering a lot of things in a short time. Could I ask you also about environmental permitting? There's talk that it could be extended to beef and dairy farms. Is charging beef and dairy farms thousands of pounds a year for what would effectively be a licence to farm, is it really going to help the environment?
Well, I wouldn't put it like that. I think you have to look at the pollution of watercourses from agricultural runoff. 40% of nitrate pollution in our water at the moment is caused by agricultural runoff. There's air pollution also with ammonia, and the people who don't deal with their slurry in an appropriate manner. There are ways that you can apply slurry to the land that mean that you get far less ammonia pollution. These are important things that maybe people didn't know about a few years ago, but there's no excuse for allowing that to carry on when we do know the damage that it's doing. And so it's in everybody's interest to make sure that we don't pollute our watercourses with overuse of nitrogen or ammonia. And if permitting will help that, I'm going to want to look at it. But the ideal for me is that we get farmers to realise that they've got to apply nitrate fertiliser in a way that doesn't run off into water courses and cause that kind of pollution and damage further downstream.
You could do that, though, without necessarily introducing environmental permitting.
There are all sorts of ways to do that. We haven't made any final decision on permitting yet. I've certainly had some robust views behind the scenes, but we cannot forget that this is a problem we've got to deal with.
Last question then. What does success look like for Dame Angela Eagle? But by the time you've left Defra, I'm not trying to get rid of you, but what would you have hoped to have achieved during your tenure?
I'd like to simplify our schemes. I'd like to have the land use framework out there so people have much more of an idea about how we can use land in a multi-purpose way, in a more effective and efficient way. I want our farming to be sustainable both socially and environmentally. I want us to be growing a bit more of our own food, and I'd like to. I'm a big fan of whiskey. We export a lot of whiskey. If we could export as much of our homegrown food as we export that fantastic whiskey drink to other nations, I'd be a happy person.
Dame Angela Eagle, thank you for talking to us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So Louise, Angela Eagle, Dame Angela Eagle, not from a farming background, but certainly seems to be all over it when it comes to farming at Defra.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look what's happened since she was appointed as farming minister. We're starting to see some stuff come out of the system, stuff that farmers need. And she actually admitted to us where there's work that she still needs to do, things that she feels she hasn't quite sorted out yet. She did reference the fact that she'd inherited quite a mess, really, and there's quite a few bits she's had to pick up and run with, but she's absolutely done that. And, you know, it's clear, you can see from the whole tone of today, really, all the announcements that have happened, all of the things that are being unveiled. She's had a hand in those. They are happening, and we are moving forward. Shame about the last 2 years, but we're really tracking a new path now.
Hugh, Angela Eagle certainly served a time as an MP, as a politician. First elected an MP in 1992. You don't have to be from a farming background to be a Defra minister, do you?
No, you don't. And actually, there's a misconception, isn't there? That, if you look, there are times when it's really good to have insight. And actually, I think where you need the insight is with the people around you, your SPADs and your advisors and your civil servants. If they've had industry experience and they understand the industry they're working in, that's a good thing. Those ministerial decisions, they're acting on behalf of the people, of the electorate. And actually, someone like Angela Eagle comes to this. She is a very experienced MP. She's been an MP since 1992. She's not quite grandmother of the house, I don't think, but she knows how the system works. And it was a comment that you'll remember. It was I can't remember if it was the Prime Minister or one of the other senior leaders said it at the time she was appointed. You know, she's doing this. She's a very experienced set of hands. She knows how the government machine works. She knows, you know, where potentially the cash is hidden or not hidden. And look, I think if we've got that on our team, as it were, for agriculture, really pushing forward and trying to do what she's trying to do, then that can only be a good thing, and the very best of luck to her. And if, like I say, if what we've seen in the last, 6 months is a result of these two individuals coming together, they're picking up a department that was in a mess and was obsessed with water quality, not that there's anything wrong with that, and they're actually starting to deliver some policy which will have tangible impact on the ground, on farms across the country, then that can only be a good thing.
Yes, starting to deliver, and let's hope that they are starting as they mean to carry on. A long way to go to put things right, but let's hope that there are signs of good intentions there at Defra and indeed across the government a little bit more widely. That is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast from the ICC Birmingham and the NFU annual conference. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, please do, as always, leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh. Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in association with Barclays.